So Pure Storage launched a couple of things, and the first one, I guess the major one, is the FlashBlade S family. So starting with that sort of high level view, the basic sort of density, performance, power, requirements, etc. That'd be good to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Phil. Firstly, we're very excited about the progress. With FlashBlade products being a real driver of growth for us over the last 5 years. Can you believe it is 5 years since we first released FlashBlade? And we felt it's the time to bring the two products a bit closer together. So as we go through the questions, you'll sort of see that we're bringing the FlashBlade and FlashArray product designs much closer together. But what that means for customers are that firstly, FlashBlade keeps all of the really good things around multidimensional performance, really high bandwidth, real sort of performance and simplicity play for unstructured data. It keeps all of those benefits, but it brings the benefits of increased density, better ESG credentials, and then also the ability to scale performance and capacity independently of each other.
And I believe that the high level, the really new thing is the modular architecture, where you disaggregating the compute from capacity. So what sort of, how do you do that without obviously giving away any secrets, and what benefits is that bringing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we're doing that for a number of reasons. We're doing that for, first and foremost, with give customers the ability to scale compute and capacity independently of each other. So if you think of the previous version of the FlashBlade product, each blade contains compute, network, and storage capacity. And when you wanted to grow your compute, you also had to add network and storage capability, which sometimes meant that you could have some stranded resources. Because if you just wanted to add capacity and you didn't need extra performance, then you spent money on performance capability that sat stranded. When you disaggregate these, you can just buy what you need. If you need more performance, you add more performance. If you need more capacity, you add more capacity, which also then means that it expands very significantly the total addressable market that we can go after with FlashBlade, because of the price performance of the platform being significantly wider in terms of its market.
And in terms of other sort of benefits that the FlashBlade S brings, I think there's a piece around ESG, I guess spell it out, I'm sure most people know, but environmental, social, and corporate governance, bit of a mouthful, but
that's right.
Where does it sort of play in that space? How does it work?
Well, very strongly. And Phil, if you haven't read our sustainability report, I strongly encourage you to do it. It's fresh out of the blocks, and we're very proud of that. So we have a real strong, leadership from an environmental and sustainability perspective. And FlashBlade has already been a leader in that space, but we're doubling its capabilities there. So from an ESG perspective, FlashBlade S is twice as good at everything. And it comes from a place where it was already a leader in terms of density, in terms of watts per IOPS, in terms of watts per terabyte. Everything gets twice as good.
Yeah, and also around the future, I know it's a major concern for people. They buy something, and how's it going to work for them, in the months and years to come. And on that aspect, I believe your Evergreen subscription, you've sort of linked that into the FlashBlade S. How does that work?
That's right, absolutely. So now, FlashBlade was already good in that case, because you could. And we'll talk a little bit about that, because one of the other announcements that we're making is around our Evergreen platform. But our Evergreen platform has always allowed customers to change the hardware, underneath the data service, if you like, as you expand, as you change, as you grow. So, exactly that, evergreen storage that is always up to date, always available.
Okay, and obviously we've been talking about the Evergreen platform, and I believe you are adding, or you have added, the Flex hybrid consumption model. So if you can talk us through what that brings to the Evergreen portfolio.
Absolutely. Let me first start, Phil, if I may, but just talking about Evergreen first a little bit generically. That allows peer to non-disruptively and without performance impact and very simply change the hardware underneath the data service. What does that mean? It means that your technology is always performing, it's always available, it's always on the latest hardware, and you do all of that very simply and without disruption. And that's a technology leadership position. Around that technology leadership position, we have over the years built a number of consumption programs, which we brand Evergreen. And we're adding another way of consuming, which we call Evergreen Flex, as part of this consumption program. So let me explain maybe a little bit what the others do. So Evergreen Forever is the rebranding of our existing program, where you can do controller swap outs, capacity consolidation, all sort of under a CapEx consumption model. You've got the subscription to innovation on the software side. You've got all of the functionality that Peer One brings around support and service. But it's under a CapEx consumption model where over time you're able to consolidate the capacity, swap out the controllers. Then we've had the Evergreen, the Peer as a Service program, which we're rebranding as Evergreen One, which is a true utility consumption model, off balance sheet. You agree an SLA with us for performance and capacity, and you consume just gigabytes. What Evergreen Flex does sort of sits in the middle. We divorce the software, the service from the hardware. So the customer purchases the hardware on a just-in-time basis, and they consume the support, the service, and the software on a consumption basis across their entire pool of hardware assets.
Okay, so if I summarize, it'd be fair to say that a lot of folks still sort of struggling with the legacy sort of traditional storage approach, and what you're offering is a sort of various options to help them, use storage to as part of their digital transformation program. Is that right?
Absolutely. We'd like to give customers choice in how they consume. You think about it, customers have different constraints. Some customers have some regulatory constraints around asset ownership. Some customers have some constraints around how they account from an OpEx or a CapEx basis for how they consume storage. But the one thing that all customers have in common is they don't want to pay for assets they don't use, and they don't want stranded assets. So we believe with our three models, we give customers full flexibility in how they consume, such that they never have wastage, they never have stranded assets, and they can consume really flexibly a whole pool of data assets and do fleet management really effectively. And I say again that although these are commercial frameworks, they are enabled by a technology capability that allows for things like data pack movements, that allows for a storage asset to grow and shrink, that allows for a storage asset to move between locations. So, all of this great commercial flexibility is underpinned by, very significant technology leadership.
Okay, and maybe just to sort of widening out the conversation a bit, in terms of how you see the storage market developing, clearly the sort of cloud, the subscription model has gained a lot of traction, but I know there is still a reasonable, I don't know whether it's a minority or even majority, that still like on-premise for various reasons. I guess, how do you see that evolving? And are there any other, I mean, you've referenced the sort of ESG aspect, so the environmental angle of storage is important. Any other sort of topics do you think are going to be, I say, supply chains, for example? What's going on? What can you see on the horizon?
Yeah, Phil, you've referenced them all there. I think first and foremost, ESG. If I rewind maybe 2-3 years, we've always had a very strong leadership position there, but we would include, that as part of our proposal to customers, and we'll showcase, how much data center space and power they're going to save, and how much cost saves they could get. And sort of 9 out of 10 times they would glance over that page and say, oh, let's move on. What does the technology look like? What's the cost? What's the risk profile, et cetera, et cetera. Today, that's very different. Today, that's on top of almost every customer's agenda. And the more senior you get in an organization, the more important that is. So we've always had a very strong leadership position there, but we feel now customers care about it, whereas maybe even as close as 2 or 3 years ago, they didn't really. I think from a cloud perspective, we see both ends of the scale. We see some of our customers aggressively pursue a public cloud strategy, and we see others aggressively pursue a repatriation strategy, and then everything in between. And I think customers are starting to realize that there's great benefits of liquid cloud consumption, but there's also great benefits of the industrial scale and the cost position that they can have on premise. And Andreessen Horowitz has a really interesting article on that, the $1 trillion dilemma on cloud consumption. So have a read of that. So I think customers are starting to realize that there isn't one answer. There isn't we have to be all on-prem, or we have to be all in on the cloud. They're saying there is a right model for us as a customer. Maybe that's 80-20, maybe that's 20-80, maybe that's 50-50. But what's really important is mobility and choice, and not having technology debt. So you could have a significant amount of technology debt on premise, which prevents you from making change. So if you think of an organization, generally they have a run budget and they have a build budget. And if you're consuming too much of your available resources on the run budget, you have none for build. And if you're not able to transform, and generally depending on the industry you're in, that's sort of 70-30 run versus build. Right? But if you're sitting straddled with a lot of technology debt, then that becomes more like 90-10, and you're not able to transform. The same can happen in the cloud if you're not careful. If you're not building your applications, in containerized ways, in microservices, if you're too tightly coupling yourself with the cloud provider, then very soon you have cloud technology debt, and your ability to be flexible becomes a lot less. So our advice to customers are, give yourself a position where you truly can move your applications and data between on-prem and different clouds without being too tied into either. Then you're going to have the best of both worlds. So you will see Pure push more and more and more into a world where data services are described within the application, and then just deployed based on the available resources required, either on-prem or in the cloud, which is what you see us doing a lot with our Pure Fusion product, with our Portworx product, giving customers the ability to just describe in the application what it is they want their data services to look like.
And I'm presuming, therefore, you're already, that description of the flexible architecture means that, the sort of shift to hybrid working, where people are, sometimes in the office, sometimes remote, etc., and even the build out of the edge that we keep getting told is just around the corner and maybe is about to happen. There's no need, therefore, you don't need to reinvent storage. It's already sort of prepared for those kind of flexible and local storage requirements.
I think so. Yes, but of course, storage is an interesting, topic, because it depends so much on the performance profile of what you want to do with storage, and the capacity and the size of it, and how much of that data you need to move, that then ultimately determines what is the best deployment method. As you recently saw, and Phil, you wrote on that, the partnership that both us and Dell now has with Snowflake, the ability to, run your analytics from a Snowflake position against an on-prem data set. Data has weight, and moving data around is complex and costly. So what we always think about is, where is the best place to have your data? And what is the easiest way to get access to it? And then for us to just give seamless access to that, irrespective of where it sits, without having to move it around all the time and refactor it all the time.
Okay, and do you think end users have sort of cottoned on to that, or do you think there's still a bit of an education for them to understand that they need to have a more flexible, dynamic, I guess, approach to storage, rather than just say, we've got these boxes here, that's fine, we'll look at it in 2 years' time. They need to be, if not looking at it daily, at least on a sort of weekly or monthly basis, just to check that, as you say, the right storage resources in the right location.
No, I think most customers know, but the technology assets and the technology capability that allows for that is fairly new. And the networks that allow for that seamless data movement, the size of networks, that's also fairly new, that we have the capacities to do that. So if you think of, say, for example, Pure with our Pure Fusion product, we're only really starting to give customers that capability now of treating your entire pool of assets as one data asset, irrespective of where it is. And technologies that allows for seamless access between clouds and on-prem are also fairly in its infancy. So I think customers has a good understanding of that, but all the technology assets to allow that seamlessly are fairly new and still not 100% built yet.
Okay, it's been lovely to chat to you. So unless I've missed anything, any sort of final thoughts, Wes, thanks very much for your time.
Well, final thoughts, I'll make a plug for Pure Accelerate. We've got our Pure Accelerate, which is our tech fest. We're really delighted to be back in person. So we've got a whole bunch of really exciting in-person events. One in LA, June 8th. We've got our Accelerate Digital as well, streaming from there. And then, anybody in the UK, we would love to see you in London on the 29th of June at Woolwich Works. We've got a great event lined up, both with peer and external speakers, and we'd love to see everybody there, including you, Phil.
That's lovely. Looking forward to it. Thanks very much again for your time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.